They called it a celebration, but it felt like a coronation for everyone but me. The penthouse overlooking Central Park glittered with crystal chandeliers. Champagne flowed like liquid gold, and I was seated at the very end of the table, unnamed, unseen. Marcus raised his glass, thanked his team, and smiled the way only men who think they own the world can smile. Then he leaned toward his lawyer and said, loud enough for them to laugh but soft enough to pretend it was private, "She's too dumb to read a contract." They all laughed. I didn't. I just took another sip of wine and smiled. Because my name is Elena Hartwell, and I had already started rewriting the ending. The first time I realized I had become invisible was at Marcus's company merger celebration. Hartwell Capital had just acquired 3 startups, and Marcus was the golden boy of Manhattan finance. I sat between the event coordinator's assistant and someone from accounting who kept checking his phone. There was no name card at my place setting. Marcus stood at the head of the table, naturally the center of the universe, tall, handsome in that polished Wall Street way, wearing the navy suit I had picked out 2 weeks earlier. He didn't mention that to anyone. He raised his glass, thanked his team, dropped in a few humble brags about their record-breaking quarter, then added with a practiced smile that he couldn't have done it without the support of his loved ones. He didn't look at me. After the speeches, as servers flowed in like choreographed dancers, I heard it. "She's too dumb to read a contract." Marcus said it low, in that casual, confident voice that always made people lean in. His lawyer, Brad, laughed loud enough to draw eyes. I didn't flinch. I kept my glass steady even as the wine turned bitter. They didn't know I had heard, or maybe they did and didn't care. I smiled the same soft, unreadable smile I had mastered over 6 years of dinner parties and board meetings. At the center of it all, Marcus looked pleased. He always did when people laughed at his joke. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened my laptop, clicked on a folder titled Phoenix Files, and began rereading every agreement I had quietly archived over the last 3 years. Let them laugh. They would not be laughing for long. I used to think submission was love. When Marcus and I got married, I didn't ask for much. I didn't fight when he suggested we keep our finances separate as it would make taxes simpler. I nodded when he said it was smarter for one of us to focus on the home while the other built the empire. His mother, Victoria, arrived with papers the day after our honeymoon. She came in like she owned the place, all ivory silk and sharp perfume, and handed me a stack clipped together with her signature gold pen. "Just something to make things cleaner down the line," she said. It was a Wayvera full renunciation of claim to any Hartwell family assets, even in the event of divorce or death. Marcus wasn't there. He was at a conference in Chicago. I remember texting him about the documents, and he replied with 3 words, "Just sign it." Victoria brought her own lawyer. He wore a charcoal suit and didn't make eye contact as I sat at our marble kitchen island, trying to read the dense legal language. "You don't need to understand every word, sweetheart," Victoria said, hands folded neatly. "You just need to be loyal." I signed. It was the first time I betrayed myself. The years that followed were a quiet erosion. I stopped checking our joint expenses because there was no joint account. I stopped asking about the trust because I wasn't part of it. I stopped painting and told myself we were building something, and that meant sacrifices. But the sacrifices were always mine. Marcus traveled constant Europe, Asia, California. I stayed behind. Victoria moved into the guest suite after her knee surgery and never moved out. She filled our fridge with food I didn't like, hired staff without asking, invited her bridge friends to stay for weeks. "You have such a nice life," she would say, pouring herself tea like this was her kitchen. "Most women would kill for what you have." What I had was a gilded cage, beautiful and utterly locked from the inside. One morning, I found Victoria reading one of my old sketchbooks. "These are lovely," she said without looking up. "Hobby things, I suppose." She closed the book and slid it across the table like it had no weight at all. "Why don't you focus on charity events? Something productive." That afternoon, I bought a new tablet and began sketching again. Not for her, not for Marcus, for me. At night, when the penthouse was quiet and the city lights painted our windows gold, I'd sit in my small office and draw. I created digital art under the name Luna Sterling. Every commission went into a private crypto wallet I named Solstice. Every receipt, every email, every invoice I cataloged meticulously. It wasn't revenge not yet. It was survival. The tipping point came when Marcus forgot our anniversary. I had made dinner nothing extravagant, just the pasta dish we used to make in law school. I wore the earrings he once said made me look mysterious. He walked in, dropped his briefcase, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I'd seen his platinum cufflinks. I didn't say a word. He left again for a client dinner in the Hamptons. I saw the hotel charge on our shared credit card 2 days later. The room was booked for 2. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I created a folder on my desktop and named it Winter Light. I filled it with contracts, scanned copies, metadata, statements from hidden accounts. I started to understand what control looked like. Victoria still reminded me to be grateful. "You don't need to know everything, Elena," she said one afternoon, handing me a check to donate under my name to a charity of her choice. "Just stay in your lane." That was when I knew I wasn't staying anywhere. The bait came wrapped in Marcus's arrogance. He walked into our kitchen one evening in March, loosened his Hermes tie, and said he had an exciting opportunity. "We're launching a new crypto fund," he said, leaning against the marble counter, "targeted toward emerging digital assets. I want to put it under a separate entity liability reasons." He paused, pouring himself a scotch. "I think it makes sense to have it under your name. Keep things clean, you know? Optics." He handed me a folder with the company name already filled in, Stellar Holdings. His handwriting was on the sticky tab, like it was a grocery list. "What is it exactly?" I asked, flipping through casually. "Just a shell," he said. "Standard stuff. No liability on your end, you're just the name." Then he added with that familiar smirk, "Contracts are too complicated for your pretty head anyway. That's what I'm here for." I smiled. I even laughed. Light and rehearsed. That night, after he fell asleep watching financial news, I took the folder to my office, scanned every page, and called David Chenme, father's old law school friend who had taught me to read between the lines when I was 16. David answered on the second ring. "Elena, it's been too long." "David, I need someone to look at something." Quietly. I emailed him the documents at midnight. At 6:47 a.m., he replied with one sentence: "We need to talk immediately." I met him that afternoon at his firm in Midtown. His corner office overlooked Bryant Park, walls lined with case law, and a framed photo of him arguing before the Supreme Court. "Your husband is either very sloppy or very stupid," David said, pointing to a paragraph buried on page 7. This clause about ownership succession is so vaguely worded that with the right amendments, you could trigger a complete transfer of assets if he's found guilty of any financial misconduct. I blinked. "You can do that?" "With a few strategic additions and the right documentation, yes. The question is, do you have evidence of misconduct?" I thought about the hotel charges, the mysterious wire transfers, the offshore accounts I'd glimpsed on his laptop screen. "I can get it." David smiled not kindly, but with quiet respect. "Then let's give him exactly what he wants." Over the next month, I worked with David to embed new clauses into every contract Marcus pushed my way. We used language so obscure that even experienced attorneys would need time to decipher it. When Marcus asked me to sign the official Stellar Holdings charter, I did it with a kiss on his cheek and a joke about hoping I wouldn't be arrested for whatever he was planning. He laughed. Of course. Meanwhile, I had installed a small recording device in my handbag and began documenting everything. Marcus took most business calls on speaker. He never thought I was listening. At dinner, he talked openly about a new account in Switzerland. "We're minimizing exposure," he said, swirling his wine. "You wouldn't understand, but it's necessary." I nodded slowly. "I'm sure you're right." The recorder caught everything: dates, figures, bank names. One night, he even dictated account numbers for his assistant to copy down while I was supposedly reading upstairs. I didn't just collect evidence, I organized it. 3 copies of everything. 1 encrypted in a cold storage drive, 1 in a hidden cloud account, and 1 printed and stored in a safety deposit box under my Luna Sterling LLC. The trap was set perfectly. Marcus thought he was using me as a front for his schemes. What he didn't realize was that every signature I gave him was legally transferring more control to me. The explosion came on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was in his home office, coffee in hand, scrolling through financial news when his phone rang. I was in the kitchen, close enough to hear every word. "What do you mean, frozen?" His voice went from confused to panicked in seconds. "That's impossible. Run it again." More silence. Then, "How much? All of it?" He emerged from his office, face drained of color, phone clutched in his white-knuckled fist. "There's been some kind of mistake," he said, more to himself than to me. "The SEC has frozen the Stellar accounts. They're claiming financial irregularities." I looked up from my tea, blinking innocently. "That sounds serious." "It's not serious, it's insane." He was pacing now, tie askew. "I didn't do anything wrong. This is just bureaucratic nonsense." My phone buzzed. A text from David. Phase 2 initiated. Ownership transfer complete. "Elena," Marcus said suddenly, his voice sharp, "I need you to call your lawyer. We need to clarify the Stellar ownership structure immediately." I tilted my head. "My lawyer?" "Don't play dumb. David Chen. You used him for the contracts, right?" I set down my cup slowly. "I did. But Marcus, there's something you should know." His eyes narrowed. "What?" "I've been recording our conversations for 6 months. Every wire transfer you discussed, every offshore account, every time you called me too stupid to understand what I was signing. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a file, and pressed play." His own voice filled the kitchen. "She's too dumb to read a contract. She just signs whatever I put in front of her." Marcus stared at the phone, then at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "The thing is," I continued, my voice steady, "I wasn't too dumb to read your contracts. I was smart enough to rewrite them." The courtroom was packed. Financial journalists, curious onlookers, and lawyers who had heard whispers about the case filled every seat. Marcus sat at the defendant's table in an expensive suit that couldn't hide the defeat in his posture. I wore a simple black dress and took my place at the plaintiff's table, calm and prepared. When the judge called for evidence, I stood and handed the court clerk a tablet containing 6 months of documented proof, recorded conversations, wire transfer receipts, offshore account statements, and, most importantly, the contracts Marcus had unknowingly signed contracts that legally transferred ownership of everything to me the moment he was found guilty of financial misconduct. The prosecutor played the audio recordings. Marcus's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. "She's too dumb to read a contract. She doesn't even know half of what she signs." Then came the financial evidence. Every hidden account, every fraudulent transfer, every tax haven he'd used to hide assets from investors and the IRS. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue that I had manipulated the contracts, but David stood up with the notarized documents, complete with Marcus's confident signatures on every page. "Your Honor," David said, "Mr. Hartwell signed these agreements willingly, without coercion, in the presence of witnesses. He stated repeatedly that his wife didn't understand legal documents. The irony is that she understood them better than he did." The judge reviewed the evidence methodically. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of justice. "Having examined all evidence, including the defendant's own recorded statements and financial records, this court finds sufficient evidence of fraud, tax evasion, and asset manipulation." He paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Furthermore, the ownership transfer clauses in the Stellar Holdings Agreement are legally binding. All assets held under this entity are hereby transferred to Mrs. Elena Hartwell, effective immediately." Marcus's face went white. His lawyer slumped in his chair. Victoria, seated in the gallery, quietly gathered her purse and left without a word. I stood slowly, faced the man who had underestimated me for 6 years, and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You said I was too dumb to read a contract. The truth is, I didn't need to read yours because I had already written mine." 2 months later, I established the Phoenix Foundation, a legal aid organization helping women escape financial abuse. The foundation operates out of a bright office in Soho, funded entirely by what was once Marcus's empire. Marcus was sentenced to 7 years for fraud and tax evasion. Tessa, his assistant who had helped launder money, received 3 years. Victoria lost her family home and now lives quietly in a small apartment upstate. As for me, I paint again, not hidden in corners, but in a sun-filled studio with windows overlooking the Hudson River. My Luna Sterling artwork now sells for 6 figures, and every piece carries a small signature in the corner, a phoenix rising from ashes. Sometimes people ask if I feel victorious, if I feel like I won. But the truth is simpler. I don't need to win anymore because I'm no longer trying to survive someone else's version of my life. I'm living mindfully, freely, and finally. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you're not smart enough to understand what's happening to you, I see you. Your silence didn't mean weakness, it meant you were watching, listening, and maybe, like me, you were simply waiting for the moment to rise. Now it's your turn. Write your own contract.